There is a good chance the last thing you drank before opening this video was banned by kings, burned by priests, and built at least one empire. Coffee is so woven into daily ritual today that it feels almost boring, background noise before the actual day begins. But for most of its history, coffee was treated as dangerous. Governments outlawed it. Religious leaders threatened excommunication over it. And the crop itself quietly financed some of the most brutal chapters of the colonial era. This is the story of how a wild berry from the highlands of Ethiopia became the second most traded commodity on Earth after oil. The most repeated origin story for coffee involves a goat herder named Kaldi in the Ethiopian highlands, sometime around the 9th century. According to the legend, Kaldi noticed his goats behaving strangely energetic after eating the red berries off a certain wild shrub, leaping and bleating with unusual vigor late into the night. Curious, Kaldi tried the berries himself and felt the same jolt of alertness. He brought the berries to a local monastery, where monks brewed them into a drink to help them stay awake through long hours of nighttime prayer. Historians widely agree the Kaldi story is almost certainly a folk legend, rather than a documented fact, layered on top of the truth after the fact the way most origin myths are. But the underlying geography checks out. Coffee's wild ancestor, the coffee arabica plant, genuinely is native to the highland forests of what is now Ethiopia, in the region historically known as Kaffa, which very likely gave the drink its name. Local Ethiopian communities had almost certainly been chewing raw coffee cherries, or brewing them into rough drinks and pastes, for practical energy, long before any written record mentions the plant at all. From Ethiopia, coffee crossed the Red Sea into Yemen,
this is the best
likely
coffee
through
in the
trade
city.
routes connecting the Horn of Africa to
It
the
is
Arabian
always a
Peninsula,
pleasure to come here.
sometime around the 1400s. It was in Yemen, and more broadly across the Islamic world, that coffee stopped being a regional curiosity and became something closer to a cultural institution. Sufi mystics in Yemen were among the first documented groups to brew coffee deliberately, using it to stay alert through long nights of devotional practice, much like the monks in the Ethiopian legend. From religious circles, the habit spread outward into the wider population with remarkable speed. By the early 1500s, coffee had reached Mecca and Medina, carried along the same pilgrimage routes that connected the Islamic world's holiest cities to traders
This
and
is the
travelers
best coffee in
from
the
across
city.
3 continents. From there,
It is
it spread
always a
rapidly
pleasure
to
to come
Cairo,
here.
to Damascus, and eventually into the heart of the Ottoman Empire, reaching Istanbul by the middle of the 16th century. And it was in the Ottoman world that coffee found its most iconic setting, the coffee house. Ottoman coffee houses, known as kahvehane, became something genuinely new in urban social life. They were spaces where men from different social classes could sit together, drink coffee, play chess or backgammon, listen to music and
The map
storytelling,
shows our route.
and most
We
importantly,
must cross here at
talk.
night.
They
But
talked
what about
about
the guards?
poetry,
They will be
about
waiting.
business, about religion, and inevitably about politics and the government of the day. This is precisely what made coffee houses so appealing to ordinary people,
We are
and
finally
precisely what made them
open!
so
Come on
alarming to
in!
rulers who depended on controlling the flow of information and dissent. The backlash
are
arrived
finally
almost as
open!
fast as
Come
the
on
coffee houses
in!
themselves. Religious authorities in Mecca banned coffee in 1511, arguing it was an intoxicant comparable to wine and therefore forbidden under Islamic law. Though the ban was reversed within a few years, once it became clear coffee had no meaningfully intoxicating effect in the way alcohol did. That would not be the last attempt to stamp it out. In the Ottoman Empire itself, Sultan Murad IV, who ruled through the 1620s and 1630s, launched one of the most aggressive coffee crackdowns in history. Murad viewed coffeehouses as breeding grounds for conspiracy and
The
rebellion,
map shows our
gathering
route.
places where his
We must
subjects
cross
could
here at
organize
night.
opposition to his
But what
rule
about the guards?
under the
They
cover
will
of
be
casual
waiting.
conversation. He banned coffee, tobacco, and alcohol across the empire, and by some historical accounts, enforced the coffee ban with genuinely brutal punishments. reportedly patrolling the streets of Istanbul himself in disguise to catch violators,
We must
with
cross
penalties
here before the
escalating
moon
from
is
beatings
high.
for a first offense
path is
to
dangerous.
execution for repeat offenders. Whether
map
every
shows
detail
our
of those
route.
accounts is
We
precisely
must cross here
accurate
at night.
or exaggerated by later
But what about the
chroniclers,
guards?
the
They will be
underlying
waiting.
point stands clearly in the historical record. An empire was willing to threaten death over a cup of coffee because of what people might say while drinking it. Despite the crackdowns, coffee culture in the Ottoman world never actually disappeared. And within a generation of Murad's death, the coffeehouses were back,
No more
as embedded in daily life as they had ever been. The drink had become too socially essential to eliminate through force alone. Coffee's spread into Europe followed the same pattern of fascination, followed by suspicion. Venetian traders, who controlled much of Europe's trade with the Eastern Mediterranean, brought coffee to Italy by the early 1600s. It quickly attracted the same religious scrutiny it had faced in the Islamic world, this time from Catholic clergy, who viewed it as a suspicious foreign drink associated with the Muslim world, and worried it might be some kind of tool of the devil. According to a widely repeated historical anecdote, local clergy petitioned Pope Clement VIII to ban coffee outright on these grounds. The story goes that the Pope decided to taste it himself before making a ruling, found it delicious, and rather than banning it, effectively blessed
Your move,
the drink
my
for
friend.
Christian consumption, joking that it would be a shame
This
to let
coffee is
infidels have
excellent.
exclusive claim to
This is the
something
best
so enjoyable.
coffee in the city.
Whether or not the specific
It is
exchange
always
happened
a pleasure
exactly
to
as
come
later
here.
told, coffee did receive tacit religious approval in Catholic Europe
We
around
are
this period,
finally open!
clearing
Come
the
on
way for
in!
its rapid spread across the continent. Coffeehouses began opening across major European cities through the mid to late 1600s, and they quickly became just as politically and intellectually charged as their Ottoman predecessors had been. In England, coffeehouses earned the nickname penny universities, because for the price of a single cup of coffee, a man could sit for hours listening to and participating in discussions covering science,
We must cross
politics,
here before the moon
business,
is high.
and
The
philosophy.
path is dangerous.
Some of the most consequential intellectual and financial institutions in modern history trace their roots directly to specific London coffeehouses. Lloyd's of London, now one of the largest
We are
insurance markets
finally
in the world,
open! Come on in!
began as a coffeehouse run by Edward Lloyd in the late 1600s, where ship captains, merchants, and underwriters gathered to exchange shipping news and eventually to formally insure vessels and cargo against
It is a
loss at
beautiful
sea.
harvest.
The
These
London
are
Stock
absolutely
Exchange traces
exceptional.
part of its own early history
The map
to
shows our
brokers who
route.
conducted business
We must cross
informally
here at
inside
night.
coffeehouses
But what about
before
the guards?
more formal trading
They will be
institutions
waiting.
existed. England experienced its own attempted coffee crackdown as well. In 1675, King Charles II issued a proclamation attempting to suppress coffeehouses entirely, explicitly citing concern that they had become gathering places where subjects spread what the proclamation called false, malicious, and scandalous reports about the government and its ministers. The ban provoked such immediate and widespread public backlash that Charles rescinded it within a matter of days, a rare and telling admission of just how central coffeehouses had already become to English civic and commercial life in such a short span of time. While Europeans were arguing over whether coffeehouses were dangerous to public order, European colonial powers were moving aggressively to seize control of coffee cultivation itself, because up to this point, the entire global coffee supply still ran through Yemen, and Yemeni authorities had gone to considerable lengths to protect that monopoly, reportedly prohibiting the export of any fertile, viable coffee seeds or plants in an effort to prevent cultivation from spreading beyond their control. The monopoly broke in the early 1600s when a pilgrim, sometimes identified in popular accounts as a Sufi traveler named Baba Budan, is said to have smuggled a small number of viable coffee seeds out of Yemen, concealed on his person, later planting them in the hills of southern India. Around the same period, Dutch traders managed to obtain coffee plants as well, and by the late 1600s, the
Todo
Dutch
listo
East
para el
India
sello.
Company had established coffee cultivation in Ceylon.
Todo listo para el
and then,
sello.
more
Perfecto,
successfully,
muchas gracias.
on the island of Java, in what is now Indonesia. From those Dutch colonial plantations, coffee cultivation spread further still. In one particularly consequential episode, a single coffee plant given as a diplomatic gift from the mayor of Amsterdam to the King of France in 1714 became the parent stock for coffee plantations across the French colonial world, including, crucially, the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which we now know as Haiti. This is the point where coffee's history becomes inseparable from the history of slavery. European colonial powers discovered that coffee, much like sugar, could be produced at enormous profit if grown on plantations worked by enslaved labor in tropical colonies. Saint-Domingue became one of the most productive coffee-growing colonies in the world through the 18th century. And by the 1780s, it was producing roughly half of the entire world's coffee supply, alongside its already massive
Perfecto,
sugar
muchas
output.
gracias.
All of it dependent on an enslaved workforce subjected
is a
to
beautiful
brutal
harvest.
conditions.
These are
The same colony
absolutely
would later
exceptional.
become the site of the Haitian Revolution, the
you look
successful
at the margin
uprising of
trend,
enslaved people that abolished slavery
it's
and won
declining right
independence
here
by
through September.
1804, permanently ending Saint-Domingue's status as the world's coffee and sugar powerhouse and forcing global coffee production to shift elsewhere. That shift moved production heavily toward Brazil and other parts of Latin America over the course of the 19th century. Brazil's coffee industry expanded dramatically through the 1800s, again relying overwhelmingly on enslaved African labor, until Brazil finally abolished slavery in 1888, one of the last countries in the Americas to do so, in no small part because its economy, and specifically its coffee industry, had become so thoroughly dependent on enslaved workers that abolition was repeatedly delayed for economic reasons. After abolition, Brazilian coffee plantations shifted to relying
look at
on
the
waves
margin
of
trend,
immigrant labor, particularly from Italy and Japan.
It's declining right here
working under
through
contract
September.
conditions that were, in many documented cases,
It
exploitative
is a
in their
beautiful
own right,
harvest.
even if
These are
formally distinct
absolutely
from slavery
exceptional.
itself. By the 20th century, coffee had become one of the most heavily traded commodities in the entire global economy, and Brazil had firmly established itself as the world's dominant producer, a position it still holds today, alongside major production from Vietnam, Colombia, and Ethiopia, coffee's original homeland, which remains a significant producer in its own right even now. The industrial 20th century also transformed how ordinary people actually consumed coffee day to day. Instant coffee, first developed commercially in the early 1900s, saw massive growth during both world wars, when militaries needed a coffee product that soldiers could prepare quickly in field conditions without brewing equipment. After World War II, companies like Nescafé expanded instant coffee into a mainstream household product across much of the world, prioritizing speed and shelf stability over the flavor complexity of traditionally brewed coffee. Later in the century, the rise of espresso culture in Italy and its eventual global export through companies built around the cafe experience shifted coffee consumption again, this time toward a premium, ritualized drinking experience rather than a purely functional one. That premiumization eventually
We
collided with
must
a
cross
different
here
kind of
before the
reckoning.
moon is high.
Through the
The
late
path is
20th
dangerous.
century, as global coffee production scaled up dramatically
shows our route.
and large multinational
We must cross
corporations
here at night.
came to dominate the buying and
But what about
roasting
the
side of
guards?
the industry.
They will be waiting.
A persistent and
listo para el
well-documented
sello.
gap emerged between the retail price of a cup of coffee
Todo listo
in
para
a
el
wealthy
sello.
country
Perfecto,
and the
muchas
amount
gracias.
of money that actually made its way back to the farmers who grew the beans. Coffee prices on international commodity markets have historically been volatile, and smallholder farmers, who
It
still
is a
produce a
beautiful
very
harvest.
large share of the world's
These are
coffee,
absolutely
have often
exceptional.
found themselves at the mercy of price swings entirely
If
outside
you look at
their
the margin
control,
trend,
sometimes earning barely enough from a harvest
it's declining
to cover
right
the
here
cost of
through
growing
September.
it. This economic imbalance gave rise to the modern fair trade movement, which gained significant momentum from the 1980s onward, built around certification systems intended to guarantee farmers a minimum price for their coffee regardless of volatile global market swings, along with additional premiums meant to fund community development projects in growing regions. Fair trade certified coffee has grown into a recognizable segment of the global market, marketed prominently to consumers willing to pay more specifically because of ethical labor and pricing guarantees. The movement has not been without serious criticism. Some economists and researchers examining fair trade's actual impact have argued that the price premiums paid to farmers
always a pleasure to come
are
here.
often smaller than marketing suggests. Once certification costs, middleman
Your
fees,
move, my friend.
and administrative overhead are accounted for.
This coffee
And that
is
only
excellent.
a modest fraction of participating farmers see meaningful income improvement. Others have pointed out that fair trade systems can sometimes benefit farmers who were already relatively better positioned to afford certification costs in the first place, potentially leaving the most vulnerable smallholders further behind rather than helping them specifically. Supporters counter that even an imperfect system that guarantees any price floor and channels any additional funding into farming communities represents a meaningful improvement
If you
over
look
a
at the margin
completely
trend,
unregulated commodity market that has
it's
historically
declining right
punished
here
small
through September.
producers during price crashes.
If you look at the margin
Beyond
trend,
fair trade, other certification systems have emerged
declining
addressing
right here through
overlapping
September.
but distinct concerns, including environmental sustainability standards covering deforestation and water use in coffee-growing regions, and direct trade relationships where individual roasters attempt to build long-term purchasing relationships directly with specific farms or cooperatives, bypassing several layers of the traditional supply chain in an effort to return a larger share of the final retail price to the
These are
growers
absolutely
themselves.
exceptional.
None of these systems,
Todo
whatever
listo
their
para el sello.
individual merits or shortcomings, have fully
Todo listo para el
resolved the
sello.
underlying
Perfecto,
structural
muchas gracias.
imbalance between a global commodity market controlled largely by large trading firms and roasters in wealthy consuming countries, and millions of smallholder farming families in tropical growing regions who remain exposed to price volatility, climate pressures on their crops, and limited bargaining power within a supply chain that stretches across multiple continents before a single bean reaches a cup. What began as a wild berry chewed by goat herders in the Ethiopian highlands has traveled through Sufi monasteries, Ottoman coffeehouses, threatened with execution for existing, European monarchs
We are
who tried
finally
and failed to
open!
ban
Come
it,
on in!
colonial plantations built entirely on enslaved labor, revolutions that toppled the industry's biggest producer overnight, and a modern global market still struggling to fairly compensate the farmers at the very bottom of an enormous and enormously profitable supply chain. It has been banned by sultans, blessed by popes, traded in coffeehouses that gave birth to insurance markets and stock exchanges. And it remains, after more than 1,000 years of controversy, one of the most consumed beverages on the planet, poured into
This is the best
hundreds
coffee
of
in the
millions of
city.
cups every single morning by
It is
people
always
who,
a
for the
pleasure
most
to
part,
come here.
have no idea just how much history is sitting quietly in the mug in front of them.
Your move, my friend.
If this story surprised you, subscribe
This
to the
coffee
channel
is
and leave a
excellent.
like. Drop a comment and tell us what everyday drink or ingredient you want us to dig into next.